Hello, everybody. I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes, and welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. And this week, I'm back to Mercedes Lackey because, frankly, I've read so many of her books that I really do have to do a few of these every so often. Especially because when I finally hit her Heralds of Valdemar series, you're going to be getting one every other week, whenever it is I get to that. Um, Although I really do plan, once the cat who is over, to hold off on doing longer series for a while. So this week's book, I'm sure you've read the title, but I'm going to pretend that you haven't read the title because I'm like that. Is Mercedes Lackey's version of the Firebird. Um, this actually goes along with one of her other relatively standalone novels, which is The Black Swan. Now, The Black Swan is an adaptation of the story of Swan Lake, and I talked about that when I did that one. This is an adaptation of the story of the ballet of the Firebird. Now, Firebird is apparently a actual traditional Russian folktale, fairy tale, something. But honestly, Russian folktales are not something that I am particularly well versed in, so I can really only speak to the ballet. We here where I'm living, um, the ballet that I see most frequently is the Toronto National Ballet of Canada, and that was recently being about like 16 years ago, was revamped by James Kudelka, which was actually horrible because I remember when we saw them at the Four Seasons Center for the first time, and you could hear every single toe shoe as it hit that metal armature. My God, nobody thought of that, did they? Um, but that's, of course, nothing to do with the book. I'm merely starting with a picture of two Russian ballet dancers in the middle of a version of this ballet, which would have had Stravinsky in the back, going on in the background, but copyright law is such that apparently in Canada, at least 50 years after the death of an artist is when their works are no longer in copyright, so yeah. In any event, Mercedes Lackey's Firebird is much like the Black Swan. It's taking a story that's, as with most ballets, really fairly bare bones with fairly limited reasons for anyone to do anything, and spinning it out. Now, one of the things about Firebird is that Firebird is normally much more about the Firebird. And part of that, of course, is the balletic tendency to focus on the ballerina, to focus on the female dancer with her point shoes, with her, particular costumes and her 32 fouettes and her rosadage and all of that kind of thing. Men tend to get much more short shrift in ballet. Um, Not always, but they have been known to. However, in this book, which let's move on to the cover, this book is much, much more about Ilya Ivanovich, who is the Prince Ilya in the fairy tale. And the fairy tale is roughly that there was this Prince Ilya who stumbles across a firebird, and he captures her and then lets her go, and because she's this amazing mythical creature, she thanks him for not being so selfish as to pack her off to a zoo or something by giving him a feather and promising to show up if he waves it in the air, and offer him whatever magical assistance she can. So then he goes and faces off with the evil wizard or evil demon or evil something vaguely humanoidish Katschei. By the way, if anyone out there wants to make Doctor Who jokes about Koschei because he is Katschei the Deathless because he doesn't have a heart, because boyars try to stab him through the chest and he just laughs them off, so ha ha ha. Yeah, I've already thought of that, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So in the Firebird, he goes and he defeats the evil wizard, and he wins the hand of the fair maiden princess, because there's a bunch of beautiful women being kept captive by Katschei, because, what else are you going to do if you're an all-powerful wizard? Of course you're going to keep captives. I know if I were an all-powerful wizard, I would probably have a bunch of captives loitering around, too. But the thing is, take that however you will, of course. But as far as this story goes, um, I think that there's a certain amount of clear reference to the actual original fairy tale, because one of the details in this book is that the Katschei, the reason that he is Katschei the Deathless, the reason you can stab him through where his heart ought to be is because his heart has been removed from his chest through a deal with some dark power, encased in diamond, then hidden inside of a duck, which is hidden inside of a rabbit, which is hidden inside of a locked chest, which is hidden at the top of a very tall tree, which is guarded by a dragon, which is inside of the Katschei's castle, which is guarded by an enormous maze. So, basically, in order to beat the Katschei, which is something Ilya winds up discovering when he accidentally stumbles across the sorcerer's castle, the way to defeat him is you have to get in through the maze, past the guards, past the dragon, up the tree, into the chest, catch the rabbit before it escapes, catch the bird before it gets away, crack open the bird, get the diamond out, and then you have to break it, shatter it at the Katschei's feet. You can't just smash it and boom, it's done. You have to actually do it in front of him, so you can't even do it when he's totally not around. Now, what makes this story interesting, and in a lot of ways, the most interesting and least fairy tale part of this story is the first half, which is the story of Ilya and how he comes to be known as a fool, because he is the youngest of his father's many sons. And what happens is that his brothers constantly torment him, and his father is suspicious because he's the smartest of the young men, and they all think that he's plotting to kill their father and take over as this supposed Tsarevich, because of course Tsar, even a man who is really just a boyar but likes to call himself Tsar, that is, I'm going to call myself a king because, well, there's nobody else to tell me I'm not. It's kind of like those days of yore in, in like the Dark Ages in like 900 AD or whatever, when there were 800 kings in Europe, because anybody who owned a castle could call himself a king because really nobody was going to buck you on that. Anyways, so Ilya's father, Tsar Ivan, he suspects all of his sons mainly because he has decided that if he were in their position, that's what he'd do. He'd murder his father to take over, and he raises his sons more or less to do just that. Ilya is the only one who doesn't particularly want to do that. I fear more because he seems not to have sufficient ambition to want to bother. He's a good person and all that sort of thing, but a goodly portion of his reasons for not wanting to do so appear to be that he doesn't actually have any genuine ambitions. He just wants to have a good time. But his brothers all suspect him, and they're all much bigger than him and all much more aggressive. So, what happens is they beat him up regularly until one day they beat him up really, really severely, and then dump him into the crypt underneath the castle, and basically after that, the idea is for him to pretend that he went crazy, became a fool, that is, somebody who is disconnected from reality, and uh, that he's crazy, but he's crazy in an extremely childlike and non-threatening way. And, the sort of person who says, "Do you want to dance? I hear the stars singing." That kind of crazy. And, so he does that so that they'll stop harassing him, because, of course, once he's like that, they have no reason to go after him. But they decide for their own personal entertainment to do one last prank on him, which gets him lost in the woods, and due to various permutations, he finds his way to the Katschei's castle. And, along the way, the Firebird, who apparently, if you see her, will wind up causing you bad luck, something that she can remove, but can only remove if she actually personally sees you. And so she winds up giving him the gift of beast speech, the ability to talk to animals, to make up for the fact that since she can't actually see him directly, she needs to make up for the fact that she's caused him the worst luck ever. But he manages to, track her down and catch her and talk to her, and then he falls, and he finds his way into the Katschei's palace gardens, and she tells him about the beautiful princesses that the Katschei is keeping captive. So, of course, because he's, a guy and the hero of the story, he decides he just has to look in on the most beautiful women in the Russian Empire. And upon doing so, he immediately falls into what he thinks is love with the beautiful Tatiana. And he goes to great efforts to beat the Katschei and rescue her, and demonstrates tremendous cleverness by pretending to be one of the trolls working for the Katschei. It's really, the adventure part of the plot actually really, really only picks up in the last third of the book. The first, 2/3 of this are really about this guy who's just hard done by his family. And in a lot of ways, it's actually more interesting than the last third, but the last third is a good rip-roaring fairy tale adventure. And he rescues the princess, and then Mercedes Lackey gives us the twist ending, the twist of which being that he discovers that the princess that he has worked so hard for and thought he was in love with is, in fact, the worst kind of spoiled, selfish princess ever, and that, after spending much time comparing her unfavorably to the Firebird, who has a human form, thank goodness, he realizes he fell in love with the Firebird's human form, and takes advantage of the fact that Princess Tatiana cheated on him, on their wedding day no less, to basically make for parts unknown, and the book ends with him going off to have happy adventures with the Firebird. And that's really even more of a happily ever after ending than she had in her book for Swan Lake. This one really does end on and they lived happily ever after, because it ends with him bouncing off with a bird and a fox and a bird lady, in search of happy adventures, the end. This is not Mercedes Lackey's best book, but Ilya's cleverness, the way this book is, the constant refrain in this is him thinking quickly, following his thought process as he thinks about and quickly discards a series of ideas, is, I think, really the strength of this book. And I'm out of time, so I'll see you guys next week with another Cat Who book.